Hello students, welcome back the another video section of data communication and computer network. On the previous video section or video class, we learn about the communication between different layers. So as you know that OSI reference model having different layers or it normally having 7 layers. When a particular data can communicate from one layer to another layer, it normally having different functioning or different operations. On the previous class, we learn about the communication or the subsequence communication between different layers. So this is the basically diagram which was discussed in our previous class. So it having two subsequence particularly nodes, that is A and B. Basically A and B are the two subsequence users, and whenever the data can communicate between the two subsequence particularly nodes or subsequence users, so it having 4 different functions or transactional concepts, that is request, indication, confirmation, and as well as response. So these 4 subsequence or these 4 subsequence particular functions like widely implement through the service access points. So that's why there are 2 subsequence particularly like terms which are widely implemented. That is, one thing is called service provider, another thing is called service user. So these 4 subsequence particular transactions can be widely implemented by the help of certain particular layers. Using these subsequence things, we have different components which are widely implemented to fulfill the functioning of the subsequence layers. So as you know that OSI reference model having 7 layers, that is application, presentation, session, transport, network layer, data link layer, and as well as physical layer. So whenever the data can be communicated from one layer to another layer, it having its own functions or operations which is earlier provided to the subsequent layers. In OSI model, we will discuss about the 2 sections of the subsequence layers. The first 3 layers, that is the topmost 3 layers, application, presentation, and session, normally consisting of data, and the transport, and followed by network, data link layer, and physical layer, having different particularly terms. So little bit discuss about these particular things. As you know that application layer is normally related with the end user, or it is directly connecting with the end users. So just simple take one example. आज के डेट में जो भी हम लोग डेटा कम्युनिकेट करते हैं या जो भी मैसेज वगैरह सेंड करते हैं, that is widely implemented by the help of the OSI reference model. And another model is there also there, that is called TCP/IP model. So the widely implemented data model, or you can say communication model, is called OSI model, that is OSI reference model. So by the help of application model or application layer, we can create some message, and after that the message should be passed to the next layer. So as I say earlier, that is application, presentation, and session having one particularly like one bunch or one combination of layers that normally consisting of data. So whenever the data is sent from one layer to another layer, when the application layer send some message that say hello or hi, so it can be converted to the subsequent presentation layer, that is in the form of header. So that's why your particular presentation layer consisting of header So header is nothing, it is a particularly address of a particular layer. And after that, the subsequence header, which is normally related with presentation, it can again converting into, or it can pass to the next layer, that is called the session layer. It also having the header. And after that, whenever the header or the data that is passed to the transport layer, it normally called as segment. A simple segment is nothing, it is a combination of data and as well as the header. As I said earlier, data is normally in the form of the application form or the user which is created, and the header is normally related with the address of a particular layer whenever the data is passed from one layer to another. Then after that, the segment is after actual transport layer, the segment is converting into the packets. And packet is nothing, it is a combination of segment, that is segment is consisting of data and as well as header, and your packet is also consisting of segment as well as header. And after actually network layer, it comes to the next layer, that is called the data link layer. And the data link layer, the subsequent segment should be converting into frame. And a frame is nothing, it is a consisting of 3 subsequents, particularly you can say sections, that is your packet, header and as well as trailer. And trailer is nothing which is widely implemented for the detection of errors of the message and as well as resolve the subsequent thing, that is called you can say correct of the subsequence, particularly error which is there with the segment or which is there with the packet. And after that, the final layer is normally that is called the physical layer, which is directly linked with the medium. It normally converting into the binary forms, as I say earlier, that is 0 and 1. It is a combination of 8 bits of information, and it consisting of you can say the frame followed by the header and trailer concepts also. So whenever the data is normally communicated from one layer to another layer, it must having different particularly components. Those components are widely implemented, that is basically called SDU, that is service data unit. That is next one is called the PCI, that is protocol control information, and next one is called PDU, that is called protocol data unit, and next is called ICI, that is called interface control information, and the last one is basically called IDU, that is called interface data unit. So these widely implemented components or these particular components normally are widely implemented for communicating between one node to another node or one user to another node over a SAP, that is basically called service access points. So first of all, let's start with the first particular point, that is called SDU. And SDU is nothing, it is called service data unit. In OSI terminology or in OSI reference model, a service data unit, that is SDU, is a unit of data that has been passed down from OSI layer or sub layer to the lower layer. So it is, as I say earlier, it is a it is normally called a task or it is a function of whenever the data is normally passing from one layer to another layer. So in this case, service data unit is nothing, it is a unit of data, it's containing the subsequence data, as I say earlier. So the unit of data that has been passed down to the subsequence next layer, or you can say the sub layer. The unit of data that is basically called the SDU has not yet been encapsulated into the PDU, that is called protocol data unit, by the lower layers. As I say earlier, whenever the application layer creates some particular message, it can be converting into the subsequent particular layer, that is the next layer to the application layer is for the presentation layer, it converting into the address of the subsequent thing. And after that, the data and as well as segment and packet and binary form all are subsequently converting from one layer to another layer. So SDU is then encapsulated into the lower layers PDU, that is protocol data unit, and the process continue until it reaches the physical layer or the next particular layer in the subsequence OSI stack. So it having the certain layers of the subsequence thing. So the main task of the SDU, it normally encapsulates the data in the form of you can say the segment or you can say the packet or in the form of binary. It normally encapsulates the subsequence particular data. And the SDU also can also be thought of as a set of data that is sent by the user of the subsequent service of a given layer and is transmitted semantically on chains to particularly to a peer service user. So let us say earlier in the communication like layer or communication between layers, there are two subsequence particular layer. One is called service provider, another thing is called service user. So basically the SDU basically called a set of data that can be sent by the subsequence user. Either it may be sent by A or it may be sent by B, that can be transmitted on change. And it differs from the PDU, that is protocol data unit. In that particularly the PDU specified the data that will be sent to the peer, that is the individual protocol layer at the receiving end, as opposed to being sent by the lower layer. So basically it is the main task. The data is normally encapsulated in the form, and as well as it is normally consisting of the set of data, because whenever we like pass certain message, like one thing you can say, like one sentence, hi, hello, how are you, or I'm fine, so and so thing, that type of messages can be flow in the form of binary bits, as you know that, and after each and every layer it can be converting into the certain particular thing, like the data can be converting into segments, then again segment converting into the packets, and packet converting into the frames, and after that the last particular physical layer consisting of the binary particularly forms, and binary form is consisting of all such things, the data, header and trailer, and as well as some particularly like you can say certain like primitive also there. So the next particular like component in the list, that is called PCI, that is called protocol control information. As you know that protocol is basically called like set of rules or regulations or set of rules which govern the subsequent things, like it can communicate from one system to another system. Whenever the data is communicated from one system to another system, or normally communicate between some certain layers, it is the completely like control of the subsequence particularly protocol. So that's why the communication protocol define the rules for sending blocks of data, like that is basically called known, it is also known as PDU, that is called protocol data unit, from one node to another node in the subsequence network. So basically the main task of the data communication is completely or sole authority or completely depend upon the protocol. That's why the protocol data unit is widely implemented for this region. So protocols are normally defined in a layer manner and provide all or particularly all of the parts of the services like specified by a particular layer in the OSI reference model. As I say area, so each and every layer having an individual protocol, and each and every particular layer having its own functions, so own operations, which is predefined or pre-assigned. So by the help of that particular thing, like that is called the protocol control information, how much data can be passed, and like what particular layer can do subsequent things, so and so. And normally the protocol control unit it specifies the define the operation of the protocol and may also suggest how the protocol should be implemented. So the main task of the protocol control information, or the main component which is there in the network, that is in OSI reference model, is basically how the protocol is implemented from one particular point to another point, or one particular layer to another layer. So it normally consisting of three parts, that is basically called definition of protocol control information, that is PCI format, and as well as the definition of procedure for transmitting or receiving video, that is protocol like data units, and the definition of services provided by the protocol layer. So as I say area, each and every particular layer having its own particular types of protocol, and the main task of the protocol, how the data can be operated from one layer to another or the sub layer. And next is basically called the protocol data unit. It is a specific block of information transport over a network. So it is basically called a block, as I say area. It normally converting into segments, packets, and as well as like frames and binary formation. So basically the video is nothing. It is a specific block of information transport over the network. So it is often used in referencing the OSI model. That's why since it describes the different type of data that are transferred from each layer. So each and every layer having its own particular sections, or each and every particular layer having its own operation. So that's why the very first three sections, that is your application, presentation, and session layer, having like combination of data, and after that the data can be converted into segments and so on so forth. So the OSI reference model uses the term protocol data unit for the specific block of information from a specific layer, which is transferred over the network from sender to receiver. So the main task of the, as I normally discussed earlier, the main task of the protocol, how the data can be communicated, or how the particular transaction can be possible by the help of different layers that is completely controlled by the subsequence particularly protocol. And the protocol data unit is often used in reference to the OSI reference model, and the protocol data unit includes the subsequence header, trailer, and as well as actual data. So it is the basic section of the frame that is in the data link layer, that normally consisting of packets, the actual data, and followed by that is normally consisting of segments and headers and as well as data, so and so thing. And it also having the headers and trailers. Header is nothing, it is normally called a particularly address or a particular address of a particular layer, and trailer is normally having its own functionality which can check the error and as well as, or you can say, detect the error and resolve the error. So in this section, the protocol data unit normally consisting of or include the subsequence header like the trailer and as well as actual data. And the preview of each layer of the OSI is listed below. Just check it out. The first is physical layer. Physical layer is normally called raw bits, that is zeros and ones, and transmitted physical via the subsequence hardware, that is normally called the communication particularly medium. And data link layer is normally consisting of a frame, normally for or a series of particular bits. And the network layer is normally called a packet which contains the source and destination address. And the transport layer, a segment that including the TCP, that is transmission control protocol header and as well as data. And the session layer, the data passed to the network connection. And the presentation layer, the data formatted for the subsequence presentation. And application layer, the data received or transmitted by the software application. So these are the basic 7 layers which is widely implemented by the help of the subsequence particularly PD. And next is normally called the ICI, that is called interface control information. As you know that interfaces and services is a process that generally provides and gives a common technique for each layer to communicate with each other. So whenever a particular reference model is there, that is OSI or TCP/IP, so there are 2 subsequence particularly uses, at least the peer-to-peer communication or peer-to-peer connection is there. So in that case, the interface must be, or the interface and as well as services must be processed in between the subsequence layers. So as I said earlier, in a particular left side corner, there are 7 layers in the OSI for a subsequence user, and the right side also having another use 7 layers. So one particular, when A transmits certain data, it is normally the data can be approached to the top to bottom approach, that is starts from application layer to the physical layer, and physical layer directly connecting with the medium, that is called the, you can say, the cable or any other network medium. And the network medium on the other side, that is of the user B, it consisting of another physical layer, and the data can be communicated from bottom to top approach, because application layer is directly related with the end users, through which different applications there, through which we can actually create our data. So standard terminology basically required for layered network to request and aim for the services and as well as provide. So what type of service and what type of interfaces can be provided to communicate that subsequence data? It is the completely implement of the interface control information. So services is defined as a set of primitive operation. As I said earlier, there are 4 subsequence primitive operation there, that is request, indication, response, and as well as confirmation. So these particularly primitive operations are completely based on service primitives. The services are provided by layers to each of the layers above it. So the communication between the layers, one layer to another layer, having different particular service primitives. So next is in the list, that is called IDU, that is called interface data unit. When 2 layers in a network layer architecture communicate, whenever one particular layer or the 2 subsequent layer, application layer followed by your presentation layer, whenever the subsequent particularly 2 layers are communicate, they have to have agreed way to doing so. So it is the most important thing. One layer or first layer normally sends certain particularly information to the next layer. The second particular layer should communicate with that or should particularly confirmation about that. So that's why in the previous particular section or previous video section, we'll learn about the 4 subsequent service primitives. So after requesting, it can be indication to the subsequent user, the next user, and after indication, it receiving the indication, it should be particularly response about that, and the response again converting or normally routing to the subsequent transmitter, and that is normally for the confirmation. So the communication between the two subsequence particular layers. So basically in this case there are two subsequence layers whenever the two layers are directly communicating with each other, because there is no skip between the layers to the layers. So the first layer must communicate with the second, second must be third, third must be fourth, and so on up to the seventh. So this is achieved by the means of interface data unit, that is called IDU, and the term is often abbreviated, that is called IDU, and the total unit of information transferred across the layer boundaries. It includes the PCI, that is called protocol control information, and as well as SDU, that is service data unit, and ICI, that is called information control information. So the main particular task of IDU, that is basically called interface data unit, it normally creates an interface between the subsequence particular layers or two subsequence layers through which it can actually communicate, or it can include the PCI, SDU, and as well as the ICI. And this is the basic diagram, the service particularly primitive. So user 1 and followed by user B, user A and as well as user B, and basically the service provider, that is normally called the network. And as I say earlier, the request should be passed from the user A, that is by the help of certain service points, and normally after that by the help of service points it can communicate to the subsequence user or the next user, that is called the receiving end, that is called user B, that is basically called the indication. And by the help of certain service primitive, that is like the response from the user B, and by the help of service access point and as well as service provider, the network, it again returns to the user A, that is basically in the form of confirmation. And the next diagram also there, that is basically the simple diagram, that X confirmation, X response, X indication, and X request. So this is basically the similar type of concept, that is whenever the communication between more than one particularly like users or more than one peer, that is called individuals, so it can be communicated. So by the help of certain service primitives, we can normally we can actually solve this particular task easily. Thank you.